Before this video starts, if you enjoy this video, there are many more like it already on the channel with many more like it to come in the future, so subscribe. I am trying to hit 125,000 subscribers by the end of the year, so I would really appreciate it. The goal was previously 100, but by the time this video is out, I will have finally hit that goal. So thank you guys for that, but we'll talk about that in the 100K special. I upload 6 days a week on this channel, so if you're looking for some consistent basketball talk, this is the place for it. Also drop a like on this video, it only takes 1 second, it makes a massive difference. So the Milwaukee Bucks lost in Game 1 versus the Miami Heat in a rather embarrassing way that suggests that this series is going to be a lot closer than it really should be. And the reason why they lost wasn't their typical reason for losing in the playoffs, aka it wasn't Chris Middleton or Eric Bledsoe. Middleton had 28, 6, and 5 on really good shooting splits, with him hitting a ton of tough shots, and Eric Bledsoe didn't play, which means he couldn't be a negative for them. In fact, Brook Lopez, who has struggled with his shooting this whole year, had 24 points on 10 shot attempts and hit 4 of his 6 three-pointers. The reason the Bucks lost down the stretch was poor defense and Giannis having a bad game. And while the bad defense was blamed on Giannis, and of course his bad offensive night was blamed on Giannis, I honestly don't think any of this was Giannis's fault. I think this was the fault of Mike Budenholzer, and this isn't anything new. While blame can certainly be sent Giannis's way for the Bucks' lack of real playoff success last year, I really think most of it was due to poor coaching, and that poor coaching has continued to plague the Bucks in this second round matchup versus the Miami Heat. So let's talk about why Mike Budenholzer is the biggest reason why the Bucks struggle in the playoffs. One thing that I did not mention in the intro that I want to quickly put out there, and is really just one of the biggest problems with Budenholzer in the playoffs, it's his rotations. In Game 1, Budenholzer played Pat Connaughton, who averages 18 minutes a game in the regular season, many of those minutes in garbage time because the Bucks were consistently blowing teams out. He played him in Game 1 in a close playoff matchup 25 minutes. I'm not kidding. And yeah, Eric Bledsoe wasn't playing, so it makes some sense that he'd maybe play his regular season 18. But he played 25, and many of those minutes came late in the fourth quarter. You know who was guarding Jimmy Butler down the stretch as he basically blew the game wide open? Pat fucking Connaughton, a guy who is not a defensive player and is really just a spot-up shooter, and he's not even a good shooter at that, so I don't know why he's playing, period. So not only did Budenholzer not put Giannis on Butler late, which we're going to talk about in a second, he put Pat Connaughton on him, which is absurd. But that's only scratching the surface of the minutes distribution. Giannis only played 36 minutes this game. Now, he had some foul trouble early, but not enough to justify only 36 goddamn minutes. You are a team trying to compete for a championship, and you have a good team matched up against you in the second round. Play your best player 40 minutes at least, Jesus Christ. And it's not like you don't do it because of regular season fatigue. One, that's regularly not an excuse, but two, these guys have had a 5-month break from the season being shut down, so there's no reason for them to be seriously fatigued. Giannis playing regular season minutes in the playoffs is downright unacceptable, especially when it's a close game. And those are just 2 of the minutes problems with this team. Dante DiVincenzo, who is much better than Pat Connaughton, played less minutes. There were guys like Brook Lopez who didn't even break 30 minutes even though he was killing it. Just bad rotations. But now let's talk about Milwaukee's defense, because that was a hot button issue. The Bucks have the best defense in the NBA, and it really isn't close. They have a scheme built around Brook Lopez as the man in the middle, Bledsoe and Middleton being the perimeter defenders, and Giannis being the help defender. That's why you don't see Giannis matching up with great offensive players typically, not because he can't do that, but because it's in Milwaukee's scheme for him to primarily be a help defender. So when Giannis was asked why he didn't match up against against Jimmy Butler to close out game 1 as he was starting to kill the Bucks one-on-one. He said that it was not Milwaukee's scheme to have him guard Butler, rather for him to be that help guy, and people were roasting him for it when that's true. Specifically, dumbass Lakers fans were doing this, who think that Anthony Davis should have won Defensive Player of the Year, even though Giannis is statistically better defensively across the board, while the Bucks are statistically better defensively across the board. But, you know, people said Anthony Davis should win Defensive Player of the Year just because he's in LA, so fuck it, I don't know. But what Giannis said was correct. Mike Budenholzer did not want Giannis on Jimmy Butler down the stretch, which was a mistake. Now, should Giannis take it upon himself to guard Jimmy anyways? Yeah, probably, and that's a legitimate criticism, completely valid. However, what I don't like is that Giannis was the primary guy in the crossfires for this decision, when it wasn't his decision. It was Mike Budenholzer's. Now, yes, Milwaukee's defensive scheme is an effective one. As I said, they were the best defense in the league. However, sometimes it doesn't work, even if it's a really good plan, and you need to deviate from that plan to adjust for it not fucking working, which it wasn't this game because Jimmy Butler was destroying them. The reason Giannis was not matched up against Jimmy Butler to close out this game was not because he can't match up with him, and not because he was scared to defend him, as Anthony Davis nut gobblers have suggested. It's because Mike Budenholzer didn't want him doing that, because that would be breaking their scheme, and breaking that scheme would require something that Mike Budenholzer is allergic to, which is making adjustments. This is the biggest issue that persists with Mike Budenholzer, and it existed before he was even the coach of the Milwaukee Bucks. Mike has his game plan, and he's going to have his team run that game plan even if it's not working. Just give it another possession and it should work. Except when it doesn't, he still doesn't adjust. Let's throw this back to Bucks versus Raptors in the Eastern Conference Finals in 2019. I made a video on this 2 months ago, but to summarize that video, basically I don't think that loss and Giannis's underperformance was really on Giannis. It was on Mike Budenholzer and his lack of willingness to adjust. The Bucks had a simplistic offense that Toronto figured out, and Budenholzer completely refused to make any changes to maybe work around that issue. The Toronto Raptors essentially put a wall between him and the basket, and yet the Bucks offense still revolved around Giannis dribbling the ball into the paint when he should have been used more as a traditional big man in the pick and roll. Same thing applies to how Giannis played in Game 1 versus the Heat. You can't keep having Giannis run into the paint like that when it isn't working. When you can't make an adjustment to get over some hurdles, getting around an obstacle is entirely on the players and not the coach whatsoever. That burden is on them. Now, it's a problem that Giannis's game really does not work if he cannot get into the paint his normal way. However, we knew that already, and there are ways to work around that because we saw him work around that in the second round versus the Celtics in 2019. You can still get Giannis in the paint by running him in the pick and roll, having him cut, and do other stuff off ball. He's proven that he's capable of that. And if I can quickly turn the focus of this video to that Heat series just in general, if Bud continues to not make adjustments, this series could end up being a nightmare for Milwaukee, because this Heat team is the worst possible matchup for them in terms of what they do. The Heat take a lot of three-pointers and they make a lot of three-pointers. The Bucks give up a lot of open threes because their defense is centered around protecting the paint. And looking at Game 1, the Heat shooters weren't even really hitting their threes like that, and they still won. Kendrick Nunn was 0 for 3, and Duncan Robinson, who is the guy that's prone to drop 8 threes at any point, was 1 for 4. If you give Duncan Robinson a bunch of open threes, you're gonna pay hard. And I bet you Milwaukee's defense isn't going to adjust because Mike Budenholzer isn't going to let them adjust. Now, Dragic and Butler aren't going to play that well over a full series as they did in Game 1, but if the Heat are dropping in threes and the Bucks don't change up their defense, or Jimmy Butler is going off and Budenholzer doesn't put Giannis on him, or if Bam is locking up Giannis in isolations and Bud doesn't start using Giannis in the pick and roll and off ball, if those things happen, and it seems like it's going to in this series based on the precedent, then the Milwaukee Bucks are going to be in trouble, and it's going to be because of Mike Budenholzer. I don't know if the mic's picking up on that, but my fucking washer in my house is so goddamn loud. And saying all of this, I'm really starting to question how good of a head coach Mike Budenholzer really is, because if you can't do something as simple as making an adjustment in the playoffs and making your rotation tighter in the playoffs, then how good of a coach are you really? Like, if your scheme is good, which Budenholzer's scheme typically is, then that's great, but if it's not working, you need to be able to make adjustments. You need to have backup plans, and when those backup plans aren't working, you need to be able to come up with something on the spot. That is the mark of a truly good NBA coach. And as last year's coach of the year, Bud is supposed to be a really good coach. If you can't do something as simple as that, then I don't know how good you really are. It's the same conflict I ironically have with Eric Bledsoe, which is, yeah, he does work in the regular season, but that's just the regular season. How good can I consider you if you vastly underperform in the playoffs? How good of a coach is Mike Budenholzer if he vastly underperforms in the playoffs? All I know for sure is I would not consider him a top 5 coach in the league like many would. Greg Popovich, Eric Spoelstra, Nick Nurse, Brad Stevens, Mike D'Antoni, and Rick Carlisle I would all consider to be better coaches without much hesitation, because even if Budenholzer can outcoach them in the regular season, I know all of these guys could coach circles around him in the playoffs. The guy can't even adjust his goddamn rotations for the playoffs. Like, that's the most basic fucking thing. So that is one of the reasons of 2 why the Milwaukee Bucks struggle in the playoffs. I already made a video on the other one, which is they don't have a reliable, consistent shot creator, as much as Chris Middleton's weirdly large fan base would like to have you believe. He's really not that dude on offense. As for the Miami series, ultimately I think the Bucks are a better team and I expect them to win, and I don't expect Giannis to perform this poorly down the stretch. But this could very well be a problem, and it will be because Mike didn't feel like making adjustments. So Mike Budenholzer, make some damn adjustments when you need to, and whoever is running Milwaukee's front office, fucking trade for Bradley Beal this offseason. That's the end of this video. Please be sure to like and subscribe for more NBA content like this, and cue the outro music.